you're unable to comment, feel free to shoot me an email or get in contact, and we are more than happy to make sure that your voices are heard. So with that, we are at 10 o'clock, and let me go ahead and turn it over to Evelyn Ramali, our Acting Assistant Secretary and current administrator.
Thank you, Travis. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning for our second 5G industry listening session. It's hard to believe that it has been almost a year since we've been working in a mostly all virtual environment due to the pandemic. Thank you for your commitment to our partnership during that time. I think we've learned a little about supply chains over this last year. Industry has looked into this issue. Thank you for the task force with DHS, the supply chain task force, for doing that. And last night, the president signed a new executive order to study this issue more closely as well. That's why our work here this morning and work on this issue of 5G vendor diversity is so critical. So let us begin. In this session, we are focused on the policy goal of ensuring that 5G networks allow for a diverse, competitive market supplied by a range of vendors. Vendor diversity is vital not only to the economic vibrancy of the 5G market, but also to our national security interests. Fostering a reliable, trustworthy, and diverse supply chain for 5G networks that are open by design can accelerate innovation and resiliency by unlocking the market. Departments and agencies across the US government are working with the private sector, academia, and international government partners to adopt policies, standards, guidelines, and procurement strategies that reinforce 5G vendor diversity to foster market competition. Recognizing the importance of this topic, we recently established the Interagency 5G Vendor Diversity Working Group to coordinate and enhance US government efforts to reduce barriers for new market entrants, increase the diversity of vendors offering 5G network equipment and services, and promote the development of open interoperable networks. We are also exploring the tools, be they technologies, policies, or other government initiatives that can be used to achieve our goals of a more diverse and resilient 5G ecosystem. Of particular interest will be the ability to deploy 5G networks using open architectures. First this morning, we will be looking at level setting, discussing the various technologies currently deployed and under development that would enable these goals, such as open radio access networks, or ORAN, and virtualization. Next, we will discuss the ways in which the US government either is currently or could potentially advance these technologies domestically. Finally, we will dive into how the US government should be engaging internationally to ensure that the global marketplace allows for a diverse set of vendors to compete up and down the network stack. I will now turn it over to Ruth Berry of the National Economic Council, who will provide a few words.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here today and glad to have the opportunity to say a few words, though I'll keep it brief so we can get to the bulk of the session, which is really hearing from all of you on your views. The Biden-Harris administration views 5G security as a high priority and continues to engage with partners and allies around the world on the importance of using only trustworthy vendors for their 5G network build-outs. In addition to working with countries on the risks posed by untrustworthy vendors, the United States is also working with allies and partners to support a vibrant and diverse supply chain of trustworthy telecommunications equipment and services. This includes support for open interoperable approaches like Open RAN technologies that promise to increase vendor diversity and market competition and has the potential to lower costs and improve security. We're very grateful that you are all here today to help give us your ideas on how the US government can more successfully and efficiently promote these ideas, and we're looking forward to hearing your comments. Over.
Thank you so much, Ruth. As I stated earlier, this first session will allow us to level set and discuss the strengths weaknesses and hurdles for using various technologies and tools to achieve the open architectures that will drive vendor diversity in 5G. These developments seem to reflect a market transformation that is embracing architectures that are open by design. We view open by design elements as including open radio access networks, open and interoperable interfaces, and virtualized implementation of mobile network elements, all driven by standards developed through open and transparent processes. Open by design also captures significant interest by governments working to ensure that the global next generation communications ecosystem is open to best of breed, interoperable solutions in an open and competitive marketplace. Of particular interest in this regard, as evidenced by the conversation during our last listening session, is Open Radio Access Networks, or ORAN. We have heard from many stakeholders about the degree of maturity of various ORAN models, as well as some of the possible current challenges. We're excited about the potential that ORAN holds to enable interoperability and prevent single vendor lock-in, a key policy goal for ensuring a vibrant competitive market, resiliency, and national security. While it is still maturing, ORAN also seems to have potential to enhance communication security outcomes, such as by enhancing operators' visibility into network functioning. We are further interested in exploring other tools, such as open source and virtualization, that would enable open architectures. We are looking forward to hearing directly from you on the benefits and challenges you see, and importantly, what needs to be done by the US government to remove any barriers that may be in place, be they technological or matters of policy and regulation. Let me now hand it back over to Travis, who has some additional housekeeping notes, and then we'll jump right in. Thanks again for being here.
Great. Just for those of you who are joining again, wait for the echo to go away. Okay, great. So everyone could make sure that they're on mute. Okay. So we have a few housekeeping notes. I will be calling on for folks to present, and then we will allow for probably 3 to 5 minutes per presenter, please. If you want to present, please use the raise hand function in the chat, and we will make sure that you are able to participate. If you are calling in from the phone, please email me at thall@ntia.gov. Again, thall@ntia.gov, and we will make sure that you are also in. Right now, let's go ahead and turn to Umar Javed from the FCC to give a brief update, and we have a few people pre-queued, and then I have already see a couple of hands, and we'll make sure that we get to you as well. Once more time, this is public. It is being recorded. We are going to be posting it to our website. So please make sure that you are doing things that you want to be posted publicly to the website. So thank you.
Good morning. Thank you to NTIA for hosting me. Secure 5G deployment is a top priority at the FCC, so I appreciate you affording me an opportunity to talk just for a few minutes here about our recent work in this space. We know that when the FCC and NTIA work together as partners, the agencies get great results for the country. So let me start by noting that in December, Congress gave the FCC its marching orders, and top among them was implementing the Secure and Trusted Communications Networks Act. This law calls for a one-time replacement program for many regional carriers to make an enormous technological leap toward the future of secure and reliable networks. And that's important because the damage from recent supply chain attacks demonstrates the need for a coordinated, multifaceted, and strategic approach to these issues. So I'm excited that NTIA has convened this group for a productive discussion about vendor diversity, 5G security, and the path ahead. And here's how the FCC can help. Yesterday, Acting Chairwoman Rosenworcel announced a new formal inquiry to explore open radio access networks in the United States, including the opportunities they present, the risks and challenges involved, and what the FCC can or should be doing to foster its success. If adopted at our March meeting, this inquiry will compile the first comprehensive and public record on the status of Open RAN development and deployment in the United States, what the government can be doing to promote the concept, and how to support new entry into this emerging market. So I'll stop here by noting that we are taking this inquiry at a pivotal time for our nation's service providers. Many of them are currently considering which equipment to deploy as they transition to 5G or as they pull out insecure equipment. And so we hope that the information developed in this proceeding can help carriers make the best decisions for now and the future. And I hope all of you will consider participating in helping us build out this record. So thank you again for the time. I look forward to working with all of you on this topic. And of course, all good ideas are welcome. Thanks.
Great. And with that, if we could make Diane Ronaldo a presenter, and Diane, if you could share a few words.
Great. Good morning, everyone. It's so wonderful to be with you. Travis, I appreciate you pulling everyone together, and to Administrator Ramali, congratulations, and great work on presenting Open RAN and educating people further on these issues. I am Diane Ronaldo. I am the Executive Director of the Open RAN Policy Coalition, a coalition of 61 global companies that not only span the globe, but also the mobile ecosystem. I think the diverse membership of our coalition shows that in order to promote Open RAN, companies need a healthy ecosystem from each end of the spectrum. So it's great to see everyone come together and talk about what we can be doing to encourage the deployment of Open RAN. When we look at policy, there's really two sides to the coin. Policymakers introduce legislation that restrict actions, and policymakers can introduce legislation to encourage actions. We've been discussing this issue for many years now, and the focus has been on the more restriction side of things. So it's great to be able to work with the coalition to talk about what we can do as an industry. How can we work with government in order to promote Open RAN? And at the coalition, we really focus on three pillars: funding, USA Telecom Act. We're excited to see what Ntia comes out with over the next year, working with the FCC on rip and replace. And I also want to thank Umar and the Chairman Rosenworcel for the NOI. We're very excited to dig into that one. The second is public-private partnerships. How can governments and private industry work together to promote innovation, especially in the Open RAN sector? While we do not advocate for mandates or prescriptive heavy-handedness, governments can provide that stamp of approval, thumbs up, that Open RAN is in fact ready to be deployed and is being deployed today. And lastly, we focus on international cooperation and collaboration. There are many developing nations around the world that have been in conversations about how to best to get Open RAN out there. Many developing nations have USAID, international monetary assistance for the more developing countries. How can we work together to pool money to ensure that the developing nations are making trusted decisions in building out their networks? But the most important part of our work at the coalition is education. And it's events like these that help get out our message about Open RAN, about what it is, what it isn't. And so again, I appreciate the opportunity to present with you today. It's great to see so many familiar faces, and I will open and send it back to you, Travis, to focus the conversation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Diane. Let's turn now to David Hutton from TIP.
That's great. Thank you, Travis. I'm going to try and share some slides, if you don't mind. Maybe you can tell me if you can see them.
We can.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So my name is David Hutton, and I'm the Chief Engineer of the Telecoms Infra project. I think it's quite clear that Open RAN is a big technology that is gaining a lot of significance in the industry today. And that's because connectivity is a large part of bringing economic value to the industry, and not just to the telecommunications industry, but to consumers, and within the 5G era, other industry sectors as well. So whether we're looking about connecting the unconnected, or Industry 4.0, wireless manufacturing, or bringing connectivity to healthcare, I think 5G and Open RAN are going to be playing a large part of that. However, we also need to look at the business case economics behind this. Deploying new equipment requires a significant impact on capital expenditure and operational expenditure. So whether it's new equipment on the site, cost of installing that, cost of having backhaul, fiber or wireless connection, or operating it, there's a large level of impact. Now, unfortunately, that is not always offset by the revenue that is generated by the use cases. So there are two ways of looking at this. One is from the operator perspective. How can I start to look at new revenue streams to try and balance the margins a little bit better? And from our perspective within the Telecoms Infra project, we're looking at a new approach to telecoms network infrastructure to try and lower the cost and build networks and deploy networks in a very different way. We believe that is by doing it in an open and disaggregated fashion. We think that that's going to add to a more robust and flexible supply chain, a higher speed of innovation, because we're bringing in new players, new vendors into that ecosystem, and better network economics overall as well. But before I start to address those, I wanted to do a presentation here because showing you what a disaggregated network approach is always easier if I have a diagram in front of me. I'm a very visual person in that respect. So if you look on the left-hand side of this diagram, this is currently how the radio access network is built today. And it's very much a single vendor, fully integrated approach. So the software and the hardware components are from the same vendor, and the interfaces between them link to the same vendor's equipment on the other side as well, whether that's on the cell site or distributed within other parts of the network. Now, what we want to do is move towards a more multi-vendor, disaggregated and interoperable radio access network, where we open up these interfaces so that you can have multi-vendor deployments between what is on the cell site, what is on aggregation points, and what is on your edge technology as well. But not only that, we want to make sure that we can separate out the hardware and the software layer. And by doing that, you can actually drive down cost, because the hardware should be based on commercial off-the-shelf equipment, which is readily available, and you move a lot of the complexity into the software layer. But software lifecycle is always a lot quicker, and there are a lot more software innovators out there that we can start to build that more sustainable supply chain on and generate a level of innovation there. Now, a vendor can start to play a part in deployment of radio access networks, even if they don't have a tightly bound integrated solution with hardware and software together. And we think that's really going to stimulate the ecosystem. So the Telecoms Infra project, what do we do? Well, we're not a standards body. We don't write technical specifications, but we take in the commercial interests from operators and the priorities that they have and match that against what vendors can actually support within their implementations now and also in the future. That helps us to build technology roadmaps and build a set of product requirements documents that vendors can build towards. Now, as part of our test and validation process, which we believe sets us out completely from other organizations, we harden and we test those products, from product level testing to integration testing, end-to-end testing, field trials and deployments. And along all of those different stages, we issue badges through our test and validation program and showcase those on our TIP exchange, which is an open marketplace. And those badges reflect product level maturity of those particular Open RAN products. Not only that, what they've been tested against in terms of other vendors' hardware and software support as well. And that's really important. If we're going to try and grow this ecosystem, we have to show that we can have confidence that what comes out of it satisfies commercial demands and is commercially scalable as well. And to finish off, I just wanted to show you a map to show that the solutions that are coming through TIP now with Open RAN, but also we do things on packet transport and core networks as well, is becoming a global commercial reality. We have a number of field trials and commercial deployments taking place globally. Particularly, I point in the US, we have a lot of work going on with Dish at the moment, and we're looking forward to growing this ecosystem with your support as well. So with that, I'll stop and I'll hand it back over.
Thank you so much. If I could get John Baker made into a presenter, please. And John, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Travis. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the NTA for holding this second listening session. I'm John Baker, representing Mavenir, a US headquartered company and a pioneer in virtualization for the last 15 years plus, and have some very large virtualized networks around the world. We already have Open RAN deployments underway in a lot of the continents, including Brazil, UK, India, and the US, and we're helping build the Dish network as the first standalone 5G network with Open RAN. Our focus has been really to promote open by design and enhance vendor diversity, and you can achieve both of those with Open RAN. First, let me speak to the terminology. When the industry says open, we mean not proprietary. Open interfaces between disaggregated components of the network allow for interoperability, leading to a robust mobile ecosystem and diversification in the supply chain. We use the term Open RAN to refer to disaggregated radio access network, functionality built using open interfaces specifications where the elements from different manufacturers are producing interoperable solutions. Open RAN can be implemented in vendor-neutral hardware and software-defined technology. And this is actually shown to be working today in Dish and other operator networks around the world where their early trials are taking place. Open RAN is different from ORAN, and important to have that clarification. ORAN is the ORAN Alliance, which is really doing the fundamental work of cleaning up the specifications and making sure that we have truly open and interoperable specifications for equipment. Today, just two trusted manufacturers really control the whole of the mobile RAN ecosystem. These manufacturers provide closed proprietary equipment, blocking other vendors from equipping or servicing mobile networks. We can end this stranglehold with and expand our supply chain by requiring that the RAN be built under Open RAN principles. The US is at a crossroads. We think US policymakers have underscored the critical importance of safeguarding our telecommunication networks from certain foreign adversaries and advancing US leadership in the mobile telecommunications space, including 5G. While US policymakers have taken some positive steps, governments from South Africa, South America, Asia, Europe have really been advancing aggressive policies to build their next generation mobile networks with Open RAN and preferencing local suppliers to do so. The US is actually really behind in this process, and from where we started 2-3 years ago, the US is now falling behind the rest of the world. Open RAN is so transformative that the last 5 months, we've seen 5 major operators sign an MOU committing to deploy Open RAN across the continent, and it would be great if US operators could do the same. If the US wants US headquartered vendors to flourish and help build our next generation networks and take advantage of Open RAN, we've got to act now. So from that perspective, we can create secure, diverse and reliable supply chains and help America lead in 5G beyond and taking actions. And it's important to recognize that the fundamental parts of this disaggregated network are coming from, is coming from American suppliers such as, Intel, Dell, Mavenir, so that the infrastructure is basically there. We've just got to pull this together with incentives. And then, clearly, we need to firstly explicitly prioritize Open RAN. So unless we do this, there will be no American companies building 5G infrastructure in the US, because essentially at the moment, everything prioritizes everything back to the same 2 vendors. Second, incentivized deployment. The US government should offer certain incentives such as loan guarantees, grants, tax incentives, and demonstration sites to help propel carrier adoption. We should also require companies to open their interfaces in order to receive federal support. And this is really what we're seeing in Europe now, where operators are opening up certain sections of their network and committing to deploy Open RAN technology. And then third is the preference for US headquartered companies. And again, we're seeing all the investment put back into foreign technology companies where the US is seeing no benefit. So really, they're the sort of 3 requests, if you like, in terms of, prioritize Open RAN, ensure incentives, and then, preference US headquartered companies. Thanks, Travis.
Thank you so much. So I have Alok Shah coming up, and then after that I see Paul's hand raised, as well as 21 US Bloom and Mike from Verizon on the phone. So I'll turn it over to Alok. Once again, if you want to participate, please raise your hand. We'll make sure that you're in a queue. If you're on the phone, please shoot me an email at thall, THALL, @ntia.gov. Thank you.
Thank you, Travis, and thanks to NTIA for hosting this important conversation today. Samsung has made major investments in the US over the last decade and has become a global leader in 5G across a broad product portfolio that spans network equipment, semiconductor chips, mobile devices, services, and planning tools. All of that coming from a trusted and secure supply chain. Last September, Samsung and Verizon signed a 5-year, $6.6 billion strategic agreement to supply network equipment and services for Verizon's next generation network. And Samsung is supplying 5G network equipment to major carriers around the world, including key markets like the US, Korea, Japan, Canada, and New Zealand. We're also quite active in Europe, for example, with the first 5G standalone core network trial in the Czech Republic with Deutsche Telekom. We've launched 24 5G-enabled device models globally across across smartphones, tablets, and laptop PCs, with many, many more to come. We've also introduced the world's first millimeter wave 5G telematics control unit for connected cars through our Harman international subsidiary. Samsung is a leader in the O-RAN Alliance and a pioneer in achieving cross-vendor RAN interoperability, even before the O-RAN Alliance came into being. Last month, Samsung announced its latest 5G advancement with the commercial launch of our vRAN 2.0, the first fully virtualized commercial 5G RAN in the US in the Verizon commercial network. A more open network architecture provides numerous benefits to operators. For one, it drives competition among vendors in the network. Secondly, it enables service providers with the flexibility to select best-in-class components for radio and baseband functions rather than getting locked in over time. And finally, it simplifies migration from 4G to 5G by allowing a more modular upgrade path. For example, replacing baseband units while leaving legacy radio units in place for some time. Samsung is very supportive of the Open RAN Policy Coalition's efforts to raise awareness of the benefits of Open RAN standards and to promote specific legislation and policies. And we support the coalition's position that the market should lead Open RAN adoption as opposed to government mandates. Samsung knows from direct experience that Open RAN standards are relatively new, not yet as easy as the quote unquote plug and play that would come from, say, connecting your PC to your printer. Multi-vendor interoperability still takes extra time and effort, which is of course a normal phase of technology evolution. Government should help the ecosystem accelerate the process and lower these hurdles in two ways. One, support interoperability test beds, and second, conduct pilot programs in some of its own procurements. Examples where NTA specifically could help are the Wireless Innovation Fund, authorized in last year's NDAA, and the NTIA DoD 5G Challenge. Thanks very much for giving Samsung the opportunity to contribute to today's session.
Great, thank you. If we could then move to Paul.
Hi, thanks, Travis. Hello, everybody. My name is Paul Chalaner. I'm the VP of Network Products for Ericsson, responsible for radio technology in North America. And first, I'd like to say that Ericsson is committed to the principles of open and interoperable networking. And we're proud to be a trusted vendor over the last 140 years to the US and being a leading supplier of 5G with over 80 live networks globally. Ericsson is a leader in the Open RAN Alliance, and we co-chair 2 working groups. And we made, actually, in 2020, more contributions to O-RAN specifications than any other company. We see Open RAN as having 3 pillars: virtualization, open interfaces, and automation. So virtualization, what's that? So the separation or disaggregation of software and hardware. That means that, say, an Ericsson Cloud RAN software can run on a third-party independent server. So think of like a Dell or an HP, and then that in turn can run on processors, Intel or AMD or other processors, and tied together by a cloud infrastructure, again provided by many cloud vendors, many of whom are American companies. Next, automation. So automation is part of Open RAN, allows operators to simplify their complex operations using cloud-independent platforms, again, with third-party applications, allowing other entrants to come into the marketplace to improve vendor diversity. And then finally, open interfaces, where some of those available now based on 3GPP, some new capabilities will become available, and some will have quite a journey for maturity. So open networking, though, is really beyond the RAN. So we have to think about much of the 5G service enablement and 5G changes happen outside of the RAN as well. So 20% of wireless CapEx is spent on radio equipment. That means 80% isn't. And so there's much more to 5G vendor diversity than just the RAN. And many of the most powerful concepts rely on other elements of the network, like mobile edge computing, core, or OSS. So any examination of 5G vendor diversity needs to include all network domains. And today we count over 400 5G ecosystem providers in the market today. So let's talk about open source for a second. So what about open source? Open RAN does not equal open source, although many vendors will use open source elements in their implementation. Open source has its place in the future of software ecosystems, and it enables broader ecosystem participation. The Open RAN software community is a Linux Foundation project that's run by Open RAN Alliance to allow evolution of open source in the Open RAN context. So in 2021, Ericsson's made more contributions to that OSC environment than any other vendor. Then what I would say is it's important to think about security when we talk about Open RAN, and really the nascent state of security in Open RAN and lower base level requirements in Open RAN is really a challenge compared to non-ORAN or 3GPP requirements. Now this activity and this challenge has been worked on in the security task group in the Open RAN Alliance, and we're implementing a security roadmap. Many of the recommendations are from Ericsson on that. The next thing to think about is vendor diversity on the supply side, and that as we see market responds to the demand, and initial 5G deployments reflect actually a wide number of active network vendors. And in fact, in a 2021 Ntia report, it shows the US has the highest number of operator partnerships with vendors than any other country. So for example, the US has 36 versus Japan has 29 versus South Korea has 26. So market share represents a result of operator commercial decisions and should not be used as a measure of vendor diversity. And then finally, US 5G success requires rapid build out of our 5G infrastructure and establishing this platform for innovation. Much of the US innovation and economic success is underpinned by this infrastructure. And like the experience with 4G, which created huge opportunities for US companies like Google and Facebook and Uber. According to a recent CTI report, 5G deployments will contribute $1.5 trillion to US GDP and create 4.5 million jobs in the next decade. We as a nation cannot be diverted by technology debates and cannot wait for new standards to mature. We must deploy now. There isn't a moment to lose. Thanks, Travis.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to be turning to 21 US Bloom, if you could introduce yourself. Also, after that intervention, we do still have some time and some space for a few more folks to chime in on this particular topic. So we'd love to have your participation. Again, if you are participating via team.
Evelyn, apologies, we seem to have lost Travis.
Should I go ahead? Hi.
Yes, please, if you would mind introducing yourself.
Thank you. Jeff Blum with Dish Network. To us, Open RAN is really about competition and innovation. And Dish is in the process of building out in the United States the first 100% 5G standalone, fully ORAN Alliance compliant, virtualized, cloud native, automated network. And we're really excited about it. For the first time in this country for decades, we're using American vendors. We've selected Mavenir and Altiostar to do the RAN software. We're getting our radios from Fujitsu and MTI. Nokia is providing our core. VMware is providing sort of the cloud. We have partnerships with Intel and Qualcomm. And that competition, we think, is extremely positive because the goal is really to build out a network that's cheaper, faster, and better than legacy networks. And we've been working on this project for years. The standards are ready. The technology is ready. We believe O-RAN networks will be more secure than legacy networks because a lot of the brains will be in the cloud, and it will shine a light across the network at a very granular level that will make detecting intrusions easier and being able to isolate it. We believe the networks will be more resilient, not only from the supply chain side of it, but the network itself because of automation. And I think what has happened in the past 18 months as a reflection of the significant industry momentum embracing Open RAN, the fact that Congress passed the NTIA grant program last year, the leadership that the FCC has shown on it. We're very pleased that Chairwoman Rosenworcel circulated the 5G NOI yesterday, and looking forward to participating in that. But I think it's very important for Congress to fully fund the Open RAN grant program. NTIA, I think you're going to get a lot of grant proposals, and a lot of the small American vendors have so much to gain about being able to scale up, hiring software engineers and speeding up the development of Open RAN and building manufacturing facilities here in the United States. So we're really encouraged on the progress. There's more that needs to be done, but having sessions like this and sharing information, collaborating, I think is the best way to have the U.S. lead in this technology because it's so important. Thank you.
Travis, do we have you back?
I'm sorry, I forgot to mute myself. I actually blinked out for a minute and now and then forgot to mute myself. If we could get Mike from Verizon on the phone. Mike, could you hit *6 to unmute yourself?
Okay, can you hear me, Travis?
I can hear you fine. Great, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Once again, my name is Mike Kondratic. I'm a director at Verizon, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Before I begin, I want to make clear that I'm speaking on behalf of Verizon. Verizon has led O-RAN development through leadership roles and participation in multiple working groups in the O-RAN Alliance. We are also a founding member of the Open RAN Policy Coalition. Verizon supports Open RAN and is working toward the eventual incorporation of Open RAN solutions into its network. We also understand that the move to O-RAN is a journey, and there's work to be done to ensure seamless interoperability while minimizing operational complexity before solutions are implemented at scale. In order to facilitate the development of Open RAN, Verizon supports programs like those created by the U.S. Telecom Act that establishes a wireless innovation fund to help with R&D and trials to build up Open RAN capabilities and support new entrants offering Open RAN solutions. However, we believe industry should continue to lead the development of standards and specifications for Open RAN, and we do not support any rules that would require operators to deploy Open RAN. Decisions on deployment of new network technology are based on a number of complex technical and business factors unique to each operator. Standardized interfaces have always enabled interoperability and the potential to scale. The ecosystem's evolution towards open interfaces further drives innovative opportunities. The RAN hardware and software component solutions can enhance various aspects up and down the RAN functions and stack, lowering the barrier to entry for innovation in the space. Open RAN architecture can create greater competition, innovation, and supplier diversity in the RAN supplier base. Those benefits serve as a strong incentive for operators to move toward Open RAN, and Verizon is leaning in to help solve the technical opportunities with these standardized interfaces. An example of Verizon's leadership and execution in the space includes its commercial vRAN launch, including VDU and VCU functions deployed on common off-the-shelf hardware. Our vRAN efforts work in parallel to the O-RAN efforts, although technically there are two different paths with some overlap. For instance, vRAN provides flexibility in terms of deploying scale and management of the network, while O-RAN allows for the potential to combine different vendors. As we evolve the RAN side of the network, it makes sense to combine the efforts as much as possible. While one disaggregates the hardware from the software, the other standardizes the connections. Although one may be ahead of the other in terms of maturity, directionally, it makes sense to combine them as much as possible. From a longer-term perspective, virtualization of the RAN functions allows for an environment where we can utilize the best-in-class software across common infrastructure. We expect such disaggregation also helps enable greater innovation in the space as well. One of the biggest challenges in the virtualization environment is the integration piece, whereas more focus and responsibility is on the operator to ensure the integration across multiple partners meets our requirements and performance. Extensive testing is a must, as is the tight collaboration with our vendors to integrate the functions. Right now, Verizon is playing a larger role on the integration side when it comes to managing the Open RAN transition. However, we expect processes to mature over time, and vendor community could also provide solutions to minimize operator burden. While the ecosystem continues to develop with respect to O-RAN and vRAN, Verizon continues to lean in and move it forward while taking a pragmatic approach. This is a journey we are on, and we are looking forward to the realization of opportunities promised by O-RAN in time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's go ahead and move on to Leah Madden. Liam, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, I can unmute myself now. Thank you very much. So I'm Leah Madden from Xilinx. You may wonder why you're talking to a chip person. Turns out that U.S. semiconductor companies provide much of the chip technology that drives 5G systems. And as you know, recently we saw some significant impact based on government decisions which we agree with, but which nonetheless can have a significant impact on our business. And based on that, we would like the opportunity to be able to sell our products to a range of manufacturers, particularly those based in the US. So if we look at it, there's a comment about, government not being involved. Unfortunately, in the current world that we live in, government has to be involved in these types of decisions. If we went with the concept that this is very difficult and, the existing companies have the only way of doing it, we'd all still be buying computer systems from IBM and they would own the entire thing. So I think we have to recognize that there is a shift in the industry and it needs to be supported. Unfortunately, to date, as the Mavenir representative said, US companies have had very limited participation, particularly in the area of radio and hardware design, and we fully support the open standards that are coming out. We think that gives a diversity of opportunity. But from the other perspective, I think from a commercial point of view, speaking, as a US citizen, I would like to see some of that commercial advantage come to the US in GDP, particularly in GDP that we've lost as a result of some of the recent trade imbalance. The other thing is national security. As a country, we can't afford to be in a position where we don't have the leading edge technology know-how. As I said, from a semiconductor point of view, we're in an extremely strong position, but from a systems point of view, we're not. And that's a fundamental issue. So our position is that to facilitate an indigenous system design capability, really we need help from the government to bootstrap this activity. It's wonderful to have the idea of, platforms and efforts to try things out. But in the end, I think time is not on our side. And so as a result, I think there is an opportunity for the government to get involved in providing some incentives. And I believe that the Open RAN is the ideal mechanism for making this happen. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Liam. Let's go to 21 US Boyer, if you could introduce yourself.
Sure, Chris Boyer.
Chris, awesome.
Hey, sorry, I was on an event the other day with APEC, and so I'm still listed as 21, which is my presenter number there. Chris Boyer from AT&T. Just wanted to pick up the theme that Verizon was talking about a few minutes ago. I think, on the issue of U.S. operators and deploying Open RAN at scale. And we had a little bit of a discussion about this in the listening session last month, but AT&T is very active in the O-RAN space. We're one of the 5 companies that was the original founders of the O-RAN Alliance, which, as John Baker talked about, is working on specifications for Open RAN or for O-RAN. We're also one of the founders of ONAP, which was working on the same issues back in the core of the network. So we've been heavily involved in that. We've been going through several different trials and different projects with several of the suppliers that are here on the phone or in the meeting today. I think the issue of specific vendors that we've chosen to date, I think as Verizon spoke about it, it's a complex issue. We have a very complex networking environment with a lot of feature sets that we have to support for a wide range of customers, including enterprise business customers. And so achieving feature parity and driving, and making those decisions is a complex issue. And so I feel like it's just a matter of time before we introduced Open RAN technology into our solutions and architecture into our network. But there's still some issues that have to be sorted out, and we're doing a lot of work to do that. So I think it would be inappropriate to mandate a solution. I agree with Verizon on that point. That's also the position of the Open RAN Policy Coalition, because I think folks recognize some of the complexity there. But I do feel confident that over time those issues will get resolved. And as I said, we are actively pushing in this direction we've been doing this for quite a long time and are really looking forward to this technology moving forward.
Great. I'm going to give some housekeeping notes one more time and give folks one last chance to weigh in on this initial topic. If anyone would like to weigh in, please feel free to raise your hand or shoot me an email at thall, THALL, at ntia.gov. And again, this session is public. It is being recorded, and we are going to be posting it to our website. So if anyone would like to weigh in on this last topic, I will or respond to any of the things that have been said so far. Now is your opportunity, and if not, I will go ahead and turn it over to our Director of ITS, Cheryl Ginkgo.
Travis, shall I?
Please, go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Cheryl Genko, and I'm the Director for the Institute of Telecommunication Sciences. We are the nation's spectrum and communications lab located in beautiful Colorado, where we have about 18 inches of snow this morning. So the title of this section is Making Open and Interoperable Networks a Reality, R&D testing and other domestic efforts. Well, that's exactly the intersection of research and development. There's usually something in between, which I term applied research, and that's definitely where my laboratory sits in this very applied place. Now, right now, we're going to talk about some opportunities and challenges that open and interoperable networks present, and we'll turn to some of the efforts to deploy those networks here in the United States. NTIA is working to investigate ways to accelerate the research and development and deployment of open interface, standards-based, and interoperable 5G networks across the nation. Here in Boulder, even with the snow, we've been building out an LTE and 5G laboratory to support cooperative research and development with industry and other government laboratories and federal agencies. Specifically, ITS, the nation's Spectrum and Communications Lab, is building out our 5G test lab. For the first year, the focus will range on a number of initiatives, including testing the feasibility of integrating O-RAN-based 5G-based stations, specifically looking to better understand the complexity and challenges of integrating equipment and software from multiple vendors. In addition to focusing on O-RAN integration, we'll test interoperability and handover between O-RAN GNOBs as well as O-RAN-based GNOBs and traditional 5G RAN GNOBs. Lots of work to be done for ITS. In addition, there's an intersection of the RAN virtualization and the O-RAN to specifically evaluate what can and cannot be achieved. And these capabilities are often confused, but we see quite a bit of overlap and benefits of both RAN and virtualized O-RAN. Finally, NTIA software bill of materials is a demonstration of the value improving our supply chains will also be investigated. Some of the folks on this panel earlier today, specifically John Baker and Alok Shah from Samsung, mentioned the 5G challenge that we are working with the Department of Defense on. This 5G challenge, again, is the open 5G software stack, okay? We're very careful to describe it in that way for specific reasons, right? As you all are very, very well aware. And I heard it today, I believe from John Baker, this idea of demonstration sites. Well, all of the responses to that NOI are posted on NTIA's website, and we are now analyzing them for the formation of the challenge. I tell you that one of the key pieces that is heard over and over and over again in the 350 pages of responses is this idea of ITS or the government setting up a demonstration site. And so thank you, shout out to John for that statement, and to Samsung for mentioning the 5G challenge. With those over 350 pages of responses, I want to reach out to those of you on the call who may have responded. Very detailed, excellent, well thought out responses, and NTIA thanks you very much for your time. I can assure you that this challenge will be a shining example of what we call the whole of nation approach and a collaborative philosophy. I'm bringing that philosophy into ITS, the Nation's Spectrum and Communications Lab, because this 5G challenge, 5G, our EMC work, all the work that ITS does, it takes the whole of nation, right? Everything is too complicated to sit in one's office and just rely on one researcher. So just one other point, as we are rolling out the challenge, we will have communications. Please keep in touch or look for our press releases, whatnot. Part of it will definitely be to convene some sort of stakeholder council, and we appreciate people's volunteering to be on that stakeholder council. So, getting to making open and interoperable networks a reality will require continued and close collaboration with industry, and NTIA and I in particular will look forward to hearing from all of you. Thank you for your time, and Travis, it's up to you right now.
Great, and I believe we have some Jonathan Doyle from the Atlantic Council. Do we have you on the line? Great.
Hi, good morning. I think this whole panel is really excellent. It's fantastic that NTIA is moving so aggressively to coordinate across industry. There is, so much opportunity to bring together, all of these organizations, which is really a very complex picture because this problem has sort of changed and evolved so much from 3G and 4G. So from our perspective, I think NTIA's sort of aggressive move here to have this conversation is really crucial. And, our hope is that this conversation will continue, and maybe it would be worthwhile to make these events, sort of a continuous activity into sort of 2022. I'm sure the legislative branch is going to, look at a number of these different issues from various perspectives. At Atlantic Council, we've been thinking a lot about these challenges from a geopolitical perspective, in so much as trying to figure out how to effectively compete against, sort of a nation who is tying finance effectively together with, excellent technology. The participation of all the entities on this call really drive, the picture that we believe is really critical for sort of the global safety and security of telecommunications, and really the expansion of, the use cases that will come later on. One other sort of component of this, to the point about R&D that we think is critical, would be the support and appropriations for the public market supply chain info fund, which we think could really be made available for a number of the vendors here to make smart investments in supporting various components of this ecosystem, going beyond even Open RAN to looking at use cases and some of these other challenges that are going to need to come together in order to make the economics of 5G worthwhile, and certainly to support emerging markets nations as they go and try and solve some of their connectivity challenges. So again, thank you so much for NTIA for your continued leadership. It's been great to participate on these calls and to be able to look at this problem, in the multifaceted way that we think it needs to be looked at. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. I don't actually have currently any hands raised. So let me do a little bit of prompting. We are absolutely interested in thoughts, in interventions. Right now, we are talking about what we can do in terms of domestic developments in order to achieve the goals of vendor diversity. And we heard already a lot about ORAN. We heard some folks talking about how it is actively being deployed. We've heard some folks talking about how there's still quite a bit of work that needs to be done. We have, of course, our testing facilities being set up. There are grants and money being made available for research and development on the applied side, on the development side. What do we need to do in order to, not just for ORAN to make that a reality, but also open source, virtualization, all the different technologies? I know that all of you have lots of thoughts, and I would love to hear them and to get the conversation going. So we do have John Baker. Let me turn to you, and others, please go ahead and raise your hand or send me an email if you're on the phone. Thank you. John, we'll make you a presenter, and you're good to go.
Yeah, thanks, Travis. One point in terms of diversification of supply chain, and Mavenir and Altiostar have sort of taken this as a very critical issue, is supply of radios. The whole supply of radios is coming from outside of the US. Back to the point earlier from Xilinx, that a lot of the skills of remote radio head manufacturing and design, actually started in the US many years ago and then moved offshore to China and Taiwan, etc. So in reality, there's very little radio R&D from a manufacturing and final product perspective done in the US. And so, this is a critical issue that does need addressing, and certainly, Mavenir and Altiostar and some other companies are taking an aggressive role. TIP, Facebook, through the Evenstar program, and the first Evenstar radios have been launched to the marketplace. But given the numbers of frequency bands that are needed and types of products that are needed, it's going to take a while to fill the complete requirements that the carriers need. So, certainly I'd raise that as a red flag, and something that needs to be addressed in the industry is how to localize, radio design, manufacturing, and test.
Great, thank you so much. Alex.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Travis, for the opportunity. Thank you, John, for your presentation, and another presenter. It was a great. So I'm located in Canada and representing working for the government of Canada, and we are very eager to hear what's going on in the U.S. in this field, as we understand that the world is moving very, very, very fast, and some parts of the world, in fact, are probably ahead of us. So very eager to hear what's going on in the U.S. as we're looking for whatever things we can apply in Canada. In terms of the presentation about ITS labs, I think that we would like to follow up with you, Travis, and with Cheryl, because we have also thinking of certain things to developing in Canada, and we believe that if we can exchange what you plan to do and what we plan to do, we can use the synergy from the both sides, because we really had one very hot topic from providing testing feasibility for integration related to the Open RAN, which we have also big interest. So I'll be glad to follow up. My messages will be glad to follow up with you if we can have a separate section and discuss those opportunities for information exchange and collaboration.
Excellent. Thank you so much, and we're looking forward to that. Anirban, go ahead, and you are made a presenter. You can unmute yourself.
Hi. I think there's an excellent comment from both Xilinx and John Baker from Mavenir regarding the incentives to have some homegrown capability. And I am coming from Global Foundries, that is the very bottom of the food chain, right? The ecosystem starts from Foundry, go all the way to the system, software stacks, and ultimately to the system. So I think the incentives has to be there to make sure that we have US grown manufacturers for the technology. I'm talking about hardware technology point of view. And then of course it ultimately go to the chips, packaging, systems, modules, software stacks, and others. So it's very important that we talk about the whole ecosystem, not just part of it. Yes, we basically believe in open standard, but at the same time, echoing the concern of AT&T and Verizon, doesn't matter which way we can proliferate 5G, we should do that. But yes, ultimately the scaling will come from, the flexibility will come from Open RAN. But the point I'm trying to make here is the incentivizing the whole ecosystem here. That will basically help expedite this development on the US show. Thank you.
Hang on for 1 second. We're getting Travis back.
Anirban, thank you very much for your comments. Azita, I am going to make you a presenter, so you'll be able to unmute yourself so we can hear from Rakuten. It looks like you're still muted. Can you unmute yourself from your side?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you.
Yes, Catherine, thank you very much. I'm Azita Arvani. I'm General Manager of Rakuten Mobile Americas. If I may, I also wanted to share some slides because it helps with. So if I can locate. Okay, there we go. Okay, let me know if you can see the slides. Can you see the slides?
Yes, we can see them.
Thank you.
Yes.
Very well, thank you. So I wanted to first take this opportunity to thank the NTIA to have this listening session. It really helps to hear from what NTIA is thinking about Open RAN, but also from different companies and colleagues who are paving the path to leadership for global 5G ecosystem. So obviously, we have been in this Open RAN and also virtualization for mobile networks for more than 2 years now. And I won't go over all the things that we have done, but just to remind people that back in April of 2020, we came out with a full-scale commercial launch of the first and still the only end-to-end virtualized Open RAN and totally cloud-native network. And then we followed it in September of last year with 5G launch, and we are seeing great results for the technologies that we're using so far. So I wanted to mention that we have innovated at 4 strategic levels. That's very, very important. Number one, we've disaggregated the radio, and as our CTO would like to call it, demystified the radio. And it's really happened at multiple levels. One is of course, the Open RAN model of taking it and breaking it into 3 layers and having open and interoperable interfaces between those layers. The separation between hardware and software and being able to run the software on top of commercial off-the-shelf hardware, which is at much lower price point. And also even going deeper into the radio unit itself and looking at the components, at the chips and all of that and how they interplay with each other and putting it back together. So this disaggregation really has happened at 3 different layers. And that helps a lot with understanding your supply chain and making sure that it's secure. With the unified cloud, we have created a cloud that's not just elastic and using the latest cloud native technologies of microservices and containers, but it also handles telco clouds. As we all know, radio workloads need very, very low latency, so it's not just you run it just at another IT application on top of a cloud. The cloud native architecture that we're using has helped us with massive automation, and that has drastically reduced the times that we have to, for example, bringing up a cell site, like provisioning a cell site for us in 4G takes only 8.5 minutes, and in 5G only 4 minutes. And that's only possible using massive automation that cloud native architecture has enabled us to do. And over time, we apply more and more machine learning and AI to our processes and makes it even more efficient and helps us reduce our operations costs. When it comes to the organization, it's also very important to realize that you have to have the right skill set. And it's not just a telco skill set, but it has to be married with cloud and software skill set and have a very agile and platform thinking on that. So in terms of the supply chain, I wanted to bring that notion home that a lot of the things that we use in our network have the U.S. tech DNA. And we're hoping that with the help from the U.S. government, we can actually help with growing this ecosystem. So if you look at our radio technologies, even though for example, the radio that's shown in here, it's our sub-6 5G radio, massive MIMO. It comes from NEC, but we help them design it, and we know all the components that are going in there. So we actually know all these components very in detail. And so we know that the entire supply chain is very secure. Same thing with the cloud technologies. You see here, there's majority of that comes from the US companies. And in our networking, as you see, it's 100% US technology. So just in terms of security, it helps a lot that we understand our supply chain down to the component level and beyond that. So we start with a trusted set of partners, but we have implemented the zero trust posture. So we continually and dynamically make sure that things stay trusted in the network. We're following the NIST framework, and we've also been designated as a 5G clean telecommunication company by US State Department. So that's to say that there was a comment that the open networks cannot be as secure. As a matter of fact, open networks allow you to put more visibility and more control points in your network, so to make it actually more secure. So we believe that you can have a network that is fully secure, fully agile, and fully affordable in terms of reducing the CapEx and reducing the OpEx. So what the government can do is to help with a fund, for example, for companies to build reference designs for a radio unit for Open RAN that has secure supply chain in it, and then various vendors can innovate on top of that. That's just one way that we see that this can work. And at the same time, we also want to put a plug-in for the fact that we have a Rakuten communications platform that helps operators that want to take the similar journey as we have taken with cloud native and Open RAN and virtual RAN automated network that helps them with a very secure supply chain. And thank you very much.
Thank you. And again, if you are interested in participating, please raise your hand. If you're on the phone, shoot me an email at thall, THALL, at ntia.gov. And I apologize that I break out every so often. I don't have the 5G quite yet in rural Washington, where I'm currently at. So thanks everybody for your patience with that. And let me turn to Brian Hendricks. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
I
can.
Thank you.
Travis?
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks. We participated in the last listening session as a presenter, so I don't want to take a lot of time away from other people, but I did want to respond to a couple points and then talk a little bit about, we can call them whatever you want, innovation beds, test beds. There's a sensitivity to calling them test beds, and I'm attuned to that. The first thing is I want to talk about a suggestion that we're hearing a little bit more frequently lately, and that is around governments playing a role in encouraging operators to make commitments to adopting a particular architecture. You heard from two large customers already on here today why, with the extremely complicated environments that they have with huge reliability and world-class capability, they haven't seen the things they want to see yet. And I think we need to pay attention to that. It doesn't mean those things don't exist or can't exist. It means when we design innovation beds or environments to demonstrate, it should be with an eye towards easing the anxieties and showcasing the capabilities that those operators want to see, not forcing them to make a commitment in time on adoption of a particular architecture. Second suggestion that was made that I think NTIA in particular and the Commerce Department have to be very wary of is the idea of establishing preferences based on where a company or a vendor is headquartered. At a time where we are engaged globally in an effort to ensure other countries do not adopt innovation, indigenous innovation agendas, and we have for many years. Nokia has supported U.S. efforts to prevent India and other countries from going down that road. It would be extremely damaging to U.S. credibility on that point to start establishing preferences for vendors. Incentives are different than preferences. So let's avoid that at all costs. And now turning real quick to the question about innovation beds. And one of the things that we've suggested to Chairwoman Rosenworcel and we've suggested to the Commerce Department in some of our discussions is work backward from the comments that the operators are making about the questions that remain for them about integration challenges and costs and performance and feature parity and security, all of which we think can be addressed in Open RAN and set up simulated network environments that approximate the deployments that will be experienced out there. Provide an opportunity for the some 106 to 110 different profiles that have already been created through study group 4 of the ORAN Alliance, working group 4 for the specs, and start showcasing that you can actually combine vendors and do so with high performance and do so with high security and demonstrate some of what would be involved in the integration challenge. The Commission can issue STAs to make sure that all the relevant bands that are deployed are studied. So there's a great opportunity with the money that the Commerce Department will get soon, hopefully from Congress, to establish both basic foundational research activities, but also create this opportunity. But again, the idea here isn't proving that something works. It's addressing the anxieties that seem to continue to exist out there about Open RAN and show what it's capable of doing and learn as we go with real-time feedback to all the vendors who are developing these solutions. So we're looking forward to that conversation. Don't want it to be misunderstood as testing. It's more about demonstrating against real-world deployment scenarios and completing the interoperability testing within other small walled gardens and partnerships, but among all vendors who are developing ORAN's solutions. So I just wanted to make those comments, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, we do have a little bit of time left in this session to discuss research and development, testing, or innovation, as the case may be. And also, let me just put out there, we've been talking a lot about ORAN. We haven't really had a lot of conversation on some of the other technologies that could potentially be used in this space, virtualization, open source. Would love to hear some thoughts about those other technologies, about what is needed domestically to really get us to where we want to be. We've also heard some really good comments so far, some on various sides of different issues. How these things tend to go is that we all are polite and professional, but there are some disagreements that are surfacing. If anyone wants to respond to any of the comments that have been made so far, even if you've spoken already, we welcome your interventions. If you have some comments, please feel free, raise your hand. And if you are on the phone, please shoot me an email, thall, THALL, @ntia.gov. And let me put it out there again. Does anyone have anything that they would like to intervene on what needs to happen? And it doesn't need to necessarily just be straight up what needs to happen in order to make ORAN possible. We could be talking about some of the cybersecurity aspects of vendor diversity and domestically what needs to happen there. So if anyone has any comments that they would like to make on some of the on any of the aspects surrounding vendor diversity domestically, please raise your hand. And we are going to be then moving on shortly to a conversation about what needs to happen internationally, what the US government can do in terms of its diplomatic efforts in order to ensure that we are in lockstep with our partners internationally, making sure that we are pursuing the goal of vendor diversity. So once again, I feel a little bit like a telemarketer here. Anyone who would like to raise their hands, please go ahead. And I actually have a couple of people who have taken me up on that offer. So let's go ahead and if we could get Rachelle to speak.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, perfect. So I'm Rachelle Sullivan. I am a Director of Government Relations at VMware. We are a leading provider of the digital infrastructure, from cloud infrastructure to digital workspace technologies, that serves as the foundation of applications, services, and experiences that empower our daily lives. From our founding in Palo Alto over 20 years ago, when VMware launched our pioneering software that allowed customers to consolidate their data centers into fewer physical devices, virtualization, VMware has been committed to delivering innovative technology that allows us to realize what's possible. And as we've noted today, in the Open RAN 5G space, VMware is currently partnering with Dish to make that a reality here in the United States and bring that to our homes. And one of the things that I really just wanted to urge us to think about and just reiterate is that we support the calls for full funding of the USA Telecom Act and really putting that market incentive out there to bring this to the US. And one of the things we haven't really talked about is just what that impact can be. And so I want us to remind ourselves that there are 41 million Americans today that lack high-speed internet access. And we're really seeing the impacts of what that lack of access are today. During the coronavirus pandemic, we are increasingly leaning on telework, telehealth, telemeetings. It is so important that we are investing in that technology and bringing the full force of that along to all Americans to make that something that we can participate in our society fully. So I just wanted to urge us to think about that and to, again, add our support to full funding of this R&D and really stop talking about it again, or not really focus on it as test beds. We need to, we have the technology here. We're partnering with Dish. Europe is already working on this. As Rakuten just also presented, this is technology that's already going in Japan. So it's not test bed technology, really. It's really about implementation and getting that funding out there to make this a reality. The last point, I think we're going to talk about this a little bit more in the next session, but I would just like to highlight that, other countries are also starting to think about this and take this very seriously. We just saw the German government put 2 billion euros into a similar funding. So that's something for us to be considering. So again, thanks for having this session, and VMware is very very excited to be part of this conversation and this solution.
Thank you so much. Danielle. Danielle, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I think I'm visible now. Yes, sorry,
Yeah,
too many video conference applications. I forget where all the buttons are. Danielle Chris with Palo Alto Networks. I wanted to pick up on Travis's remark about hitting on some of the cybersecurity aspects of Open RAN. So Palo Alto Networks is the world's largest cybersecurity company. We do not make the components in the RAN, but we do secure the entire 5G infrastructure, including the RAN or Open RAN or however that's aggregated. So there's been a number of discussions about the importance of security in Open RAN, and wanted to highlight that a lot of companies in the ecosystem are really committed to that. We know the U.S. government is very interested in security in the Open RAN. So as you think about some of the policy levers, we're not talking about mandates here, but encouragement. There has to be a focus on securing Open RAN. There's various ways that can be done, through securing the network slices, promoting cloud security, promoting a zero trust approach. But we really need to remember to integrate cybersecurity into what we're doing, because that's just going to be essential for 5G networks in the future to be secure. That's it.
Great. Thank you so much. Liam.
Great. Thanks very much again. So yeah, basically, one of the things I did want to talk about is I like to go by analogies and where have things worked before. And I think one of the things that we tend to look at, I come from a history actually in the processor business, but if you look at what happened in data center around disaggregation, I really would like to echo what VMware is talking about. The whole concept of virtualization and the ability to innovate at that level, I think, is really critical. And I think when we saw what happened within those networks, I think we saw what was a very closed and integrated network open up, and as a result, we saw a massive amount of innovation. So again, when we look at these things, they're very difficult to get going. But on the other hand, when they do, they usually result in significant advances. And it's not just in terms of cost, but also in terms of aspects of security that I think we're having, for example, an open community in a situation where each person can contribute is a huge plus in terms of moving things forward.
Thank you so much. Let's turn it back to Azita.
Hi, thank you. I'm Azita from Rakuten Mobile. A couple of points as my colleagues were discussing. One is, if you really want to have leadership in mobile networks for the US, I think we should start from the vision. Where do we want to be in 5 years? Where do we want to be in 10 years, in 15 years, 20 years, etc. I think it's always harder if you start from where you are and thinking, okay, there's this big mountain that I have to climb. And if I take an analogy, if I want to get in shape, if I just think about all the things I have to do to change my diet, go exercise, it just feels like getting out of my comfort zone is so much harder, rather than think about what's my vision of what does in shape look like and how do I get from here to there. And keeping that vision and being committed to that vision then pulls you forward. If you just think about, what are all the problems with Open RAN, right? Then it makes it more difficult to move forward. Instead, if you think, okay, at some point, we have to have Open RAN, we have to have secure supply chain. And what can we do to get there faster, right? So, and is this really a technology issue, or is this our stepping out of our comfort zone? We believe that there's, at this point, a lot of the technology issues have been solved, and the remaining ones are not something that we collectively cannot solve if we put our minds together. If you just keep looking for issues, of course there will be issues, So I think that, working on USA Telecom Act, making sure that it's funded enough, looking at our vision for leadership, and then having all these other things like the 5G challenge and all helping with the supply chain, those are all enablers to getting to our vision. I really like what Rachel from VMware said about this is no longer a test bed, right? We're not just testing things anymore. It is a reality. We are showing it. We have 5G networks with download speeds of 1.77 gigabits per second. I mean, it's happening now. It's not in test bed. We have subscribers. We have phones. We have, and it is a very secure network. It's working. I understand that every operator's infrastructure is different, so obviously they have to have things made, customized and issues resolved for those networks, and that's a valid point. But again, if we commit to something, then we need to move forward on that. And if just realizing that, for example, with this rip and replace, if you put in legacy equipment in there, they're going to stay there for the next 10, 15, 20 years. So whatever steps we're taking today, it's going to have ramification for decades to come. So that's something that we really need to take seriously about every piece of equipment that goes into anybody's network right now, to see if it helps our vision or it takes away from our vision. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's go to Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Trevor. So I wanted to just pick up on a couple of points. One is on the manufacturing side, and I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention. So Ericsson made a $100 million investment in a 5G factory plant in Louisville, Texas. And actually, it's been a great experience for us because not only does it give manufacturing capability in the US and bring jobs, but it's also allowed us to use 5G to build 5G. And so some of the use cases of 5G is really enabling that manufacturing segment and making it more efficient for US manufacturers. And so now we have, it's a pretty cool environment where you have robotic devices unloading components from the inbound freight, taking it to the production line, building it, testing it, and shipping it out. So it's actually a very cool environment. But I think economically it's important because it can help stimulate manufacturing in the US. And then also it's also proving out the use cases on 5G as well. So that's one point. The second point is on silicon. So we have a design center in Austin, and so the importance of silicon in radio. So some of the capabilities will be in the cloud and on cost and commercial silicon, but customized silicon gives you the extra performance in radio networks. And as we deal with gigabits and gigabits across multiple frequency bands, some of that silicon capability is really important in state-of-the-art networks. So I think it's also important to have that design capability in the US as well. And then maybe just picking up on the virtualization point. So we think, Ericsson believes in virtualization is a key thing. It'll be a key part of networks of the future. The Ericsson Cloud RAN portfolio, which is the virtualization, our virtualization solution, is being deployed. It's a really important capability. One of the things I'd say is that it's a journey for virtualization. So if you look at a lower data rate, lower capacity systems moving up to 5G systems with all the latest mid-band that the FCC released. I mean, that's a capacity and performance continuum that we're kind of moving along. And so the industry is working together to work on that performance as much as possible. And then finally, just as we do that, as we bring things to the cloud, as we open these interfaces, the work that ORAN Alliance Security Task Group is really critical, because security in Open RAN is not just, stick this big brain somewhere and you'll check out all the kind of security issues in the network. It has to be built in. It has to be built in at a more fundamental level. So each of the links are protected, and as you connect different devices and different parts of the network, each of those connections have to be done in a secure way to have a trust stack or a trust anchor. So certainly not a overlay thing, and security can't be an afterthought. It has to be built into the very fabric of the Open RAN implementations. So I think that's an important, and so the Security Task Group in ORAN Alliance is an important avenue for that. Okay, back to you, Travis. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to go to Dilip, and then we're going to go to Edward Diaz on the phone.
Thanks, Travis. A couple of points. First, I just wanted to amplify a little bit the distinction between, Open RAN and open source, which sometimes gets confused. In reading the 5G challenge request for comments, and that was something, it was a little confusing at times whether they were focused on open interfaces or on open source code in the stack. And reading the comments, I see that several people were, raising that issue of confusion. So, one thing I've observed is that, yes, the government should be encouraging open source as a part of this, but I think the primary focus should really be on, the open interfaces piece, because even if you have open source solutions, you're going to have a need to put everything else that comes on top of that. I mean, the analogy is when Linux first came out and became a thing, there was still lots and lots of room for a company like Red Hat and others to offer all of the enterprise level assurance and quality and those kinds of things that go on top of an open source foundation. So I think the government shouldn't get focused too narrowly on open source when you're still going to need all of that other stuff that comes on top of it. I thought I heard Cheryl sort of clarify that she was talking about an open source stack today, but I wasn't exactly clear about what she said. So I just think that area of confusion needs to be elucidated. The second point is that, just the global point, we're seeing lots and lots of activity suddenly from the US government in the past month or 2 months, which is natural, a new administration. And some of this work, of course, started from the law last year that was passed in Congress, but just sort of the importance of having all of the US government agencies stay coordinated and kind of stay together, because there's a lot of work coming at us from different agencies and different, forums right now to try and keep all of this stuff on track. So just a request to all of the USG participants to try and stay coordinated with each other. I think that would help us all. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And we do have a number of our interagency partners on the line today, and we absolutely hear that point. Let's go ahead and Edward, if you could please unmute yourself, hit *6, and we should be able to hear you.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So thanks for the time here today. I appreciate all the discussion that's happening and perspectives being shared. It's good to hear from a lot of folks and partners we're working with. The topic here around the research and development needs, I just wanted to take a minute to broaden the scope a little bit, to think about 5G and its evolution. And what we're really trying to solve is not necessarily just deploying a technology, but what that technology is going to be used for. So along those lines, we're very focused on enabling the capabilities and the performance that's required to do that. There's a few industry groups that we're involved in that I wanted to, create some broad awareness on, that are looking at the evolution of 5G and the applications that need to be developed for that. So it goes to the fundamental need about where research needs to be done and how all these suppliers and partners in this discussion today have a role in helping us get there. So one to bring up is the Addis Next G Alliance. We're a founding member of that. There's several dozen founding members actually, and that's a group that intends to develop a roadmap for beyond 5G and the evolution of 5G. And these are things that we need everyone to be looking at from a multi-year standpoint to really look at, what's required to drive the technology forward. And I bring this up because it's very crucial to look at not only what the technology needs to do today to live up to the phase 1 and phase 2 5G requirements, but what comes in the next few releases from 3GPP and the evolution of open standards to support those requirements as well. So that's one aspect of it. The other one I want to bring up was the MITRE Open Ingenuity program, which is also looking at vehicles and ecosystems that can lead to U.S. adoption of 5G technologies. That space is specifically targeting the drone ecosystem and unmanned aerial vehicles. So I think that's one that's more near term, and the U.S. has an opportunity to drive some advantages there because of the leadership of a lot of the partners in that group. So from that perspective, just want to make sure we're thinking broadly about what we need to do in a multi-year view to drive the technology forward as it evolves. So thanks for the time today.
Great, thank you so much. And let's turn to Jack, and then we will move on to our next session. Jack, go ahead.
Well, I get to have the last word. Thank you, Travis. I appreciate that. This is Jack Nicholski from Qualcomm. I want to go back to a question that you asked, I think, to kick off this part of the meeting, you asked, what about virtualization and open source versus ORAN? And I might be stating the obvious here, but I think when people are talking about ORAN, there's sort of this fundamental base assumption that virtualization and open source are necessary to make ORAN happen. And if you look at the ORAN Alliance, they actually have working groups on specifically on these topics. The hardware and software architectures coming out of ORAN are designed to support virtualized deployments. There's a lot of open source projects both within ORAN and outside of the ORAN Alliance that have been started already. For example, the RAN Intelligent Controller has a lot of projects. It'll be interesting to see which of these succeed in the end. But the point I'm trying to make is that when you heard people earlier just mentioning ORAN, Open RAN, vRAN, even Cloud RAN sometimes, you know, the virtualization and open source aspects are sort of an assumption, you know, so it's hard to tease these apart and separate them sometimes because it's such a basic part of the solution.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that and for that helpful correction. And you did get the last word on this session. We're now going to be turning our sights to the international component. And with that, let me turn it over to Jaysha Ray.
Thank you, Travis. My name is Jaysha Ray, and I'm the Associate Administrator for International Affairs at NTIA. Another key component of promoting vendor diversity and open by design networks is working collaboratively with international partners, which is our third and final discussion topic for today. I'll also note that we are pleased that representatives from around the world have also joined in the listening session. The Department of Commerce and other U.S. agencies are collaborating with like-minded countries on policy options to advance the development and deployment of open interface, standards-based, interoperable 5G networks as a means to create innovation, spur competition, and expand the 5G supply chain. In line with this vision, the United States has been working hand in hand with the UK in its efforts to launch a set of high-level principles as a part of its G7 presidency. These principles would promote international collaboration on the diversification of the telecom supply chain and help create a long-term vision of a more open, diverse, and secure market. We applaud the UK's leadership in this critical area and would be interested to hear industry's feedback on this initiative, as well as what concepts you think should be included in the principles. We believe that principles are a key first step, but they are not sufficient on their own. That is why we are partnering with the private sector and other like-minded governments on research and development, trials, testbeds, and capacity building to promote a global transition to open and interoperable networks. Continued close coordination between the U.S. government, private sector, academia, and international government partners is required to ensure the adoption of policies, standards, guidelines, and procurement strategies that reinforce 5G vendor diversity and foster market competition. To this end, and as NTIA Acting Administrator Evelyn Ramali mentioned earlier today, NTIA has recently formed the 5G Vendor Diversity Working Group to coordinate U.S. government efforts to increase the range of vendors offering 5G network equipment and services. One key part of this workstream is coordinating U.S. government outreach to foreign governments and stakeholders. Now, there are a number of agencies that are actively participating in this working group and undertaking a range of efforts to support vendor diversity both domestically and abroad. One of the key agencies promoting 5G deployment, vendor diversity, and open interoperable networks abroad is the U.S. Agency for International Development. And as such, I would like to turn it over to Tom Kautsky, who is the Digital Inclusion Team Lead at USAID's Innovation, Technology, and Research Hub, to discuss some of USAID's efforts. Over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Jaysha, and thank you, NTIA, for organizing this excellent event and for your leadership. And thanks to everyone in the industry and our partners and the representatives here on the call today. Over the last few months, as I've learned more about Open RAN, I've been encouraged and excited to learn about how this exciting emerging industry sees developing countries as an important market opportunity for virtualized network deployments. USAID last year launched a digital strategy that outlines our agency's approach to how to grow inclusive digital infrastructure and how that inclusive digital infrastructure plays a critical role in a country's long-term sustainable development. The digital strategy squarely makes the promotion of open, inclusive, reliable, and secure networks a key part of the work that we do in our 80 missions worldwide. The digital strategy follows 25 years of history at USAID in promoting an open and innovative internet in developing countries. Beginning in 1996, the USAID's Leland Initiative established some of the first internet access points in sub-Saharan Africa. Other projects following on helped countries write national broadband plans, reform their spectrum licensing policies, establishing universal access, and other telecommunications regulations. The Innovation Technology and Research Hub, where I work, also invested directly in innovation. A few years ago, USAID provided initial seed funding to a group of researchers at California, Berkeley, that were working to build what they called a cellular network in a box, using a quirky, innovative, and interesting ground-up initiative called OpenBTS. USAID funding helped them commercialize that architecture, where it was deployed on a trial basis in Philippines and Indonesia. Those of you that are familiar with the history of the Open RAN technology know subsequently that company called Indago was acquired by Facebook in 2015, and a year later, Facebook launched the TIP, the Telecom Infrastructure Project. In developing countries, as we've touched on earlier today, developing countries face significant critical challenges. Closed internet architectures that are promoted by Huawei and ZTE are tied to the hip with the PRC's Belt and Road Initiative and debt diplomacy. These closed architectures invariably present a quick and easy and inexpensive answer to the connectivity and network access challenges that many developing countries face. USAID missions abroad are working hard with our interagency partners at State and the Department of Commerce to counter these tempting offers, which are wolf in sheep's clothing. We see Open RAN and virtualized networks as a key part of the solution. One way in which USAID works with our interagency partners in the industry is through the Digital Connectivity and Cybersecurity Partnership, or DCCP. The DCCP is focused on helping developing countries build inclusive, open, secure, and reliable ecosystems by expanding secure networks, advancing open internet and pro-competitive ICT policies and regulations, advancing opportunities for ICT and digital trade, and building cybersecurity capacity. Through the DCCP, USAID engages the business community on ICT policy issues and provides expert advice to ministries. If any of the industry partners in this discussion today are facing policy challenges to growing your business in a particular developing country, I would encourage you to reach out to me or to articulate them in this following discussion, and we can explore whether our DCCP programs can help break down those barriers. In addition, USAID has recently launched a new project focusing specifically on building ties between the Open RAN industry and our development professionals and governments abroad. We want this project to demonstrate the business case as well as the development opportunities that Open RAN technology offers for developing countries around the world. We are working with the Access consultancy called the Access Partnership, represented by Dilip in this conference today, on this project. This project is building towards a series of regional briefings coming up this May. We'll be reaching out to many of you over the next few months. If you're interested in participating in this project or in these workshops, please feel free to reach out to me at Tom Kautsky or tkautsky@usaid.gov, or and anyone at NTIA can put you in touch with Dilip or myself. I'm looking forward to this international engagement discussion today, and I hope you can all educate me on various development opportunities and successes that you may be seeing in the markets in which you are trying to grow your businesses. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom. And with that prompt remember, please feel free to raise your hand if you have things that you would like to share or interventions that you want to make in anything that you've heard so far. If you are on the phone, please make sure that you email me, thall, THALL, @ntia.gov. I will take this opportunity to once again note that this is being recorded. We are planning on posting to our website as soon as we possibly can. And we would love your participation in this conversation. Again, the topic that we are working on right now is how can the U.S. government properly engage internationally to ensure that we are pursuing vendor diversity, not just simply domestically, but also abroad with our partners, as Tom noted, in developing markets, and ensuring that we are, in fact, pushing back on some of the lock-in models that we have seen coming out of China. So if you have comments on that, please raise your hand, or you can, again, email me at thall, THALL, @ntia.gov. Also, if you had a few thoughts or comments on an earlier topic or issue that you did not have an opportunity to kind of raise, but you would like to make the intervention, that'd be great. And I see John Baker has his hand up. Let's go ahead and go to John. If you could make John a presenter, and then John, you'll be able to unmute yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Travis. It's John Baker from Avenir. Couple of points really on a global basis and also somewhat on a local basis. I think, as we see it globally, there's this move to keep Open RAN or supply chain diversification in the standards groups, and on the basis that if it's kept as a laboratory exercise or a standards exercise, then essentially Open RAN will fail. And as Azita said, operators will go ahead and deploy existing equipment and be locked in forever. So that's one point. Secondly, diversification will only happen when interoperability actually starts to take place. And as much as people saying that they're out in the Open RAN, we Mavenir only believe that people are in Open RAN when interoperability starts to happen. And so far, the offers for interoperability testing with certain vendors are falling on deaf ears. So, that's another key point to keep chasing on a global basis as the vendor ecosystem is supported. And then lastly, is control of the supply chain for components and equipment. And, there's something that needs to be watched. And we've seen, instances where supply chain feels threatened because moving into a new technology area certainly goes against some of the incumbent strategies. So there's three key points, I think, that we're seeing both on a local and on a global basis. Thanks, Travis.
Great. Thank you so much. Any thoughts, reactions to some of those points? Certainly raising a lot of issues that are extraordinarily topical, questions around the supply chain. We have questions around some of the activities and how they link domestically and internationally. This is your opportunity to raise your hand. We have Jeffrey Marks from Nokia. We could go ahead and make Jeffrey a presenter, and Jeffrey, you'll be able to unmute yourself. Thank you. And Jeffrey, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
How's that? Can you
Perfect.
hear me? Great. I just wanted to react to the recent comment about having things go through standards relegates them to a lab environment. I just want to say that Nokia is very bullish on Open RAN, but we're also we believe that it's important that there be a standardized environment where carriers can buy, or anyone who wants to implement Open RAN can purchase from multiple vendors and know they're going to work together without those vendors having bilateral agreements or having to do things in that way. So we don't see standardizing the technology like is done that been successfully for other radio technologies is a negative or is something to keep ORAN in a cage. Far from it. We believe it's important for the thriving of Open RAN in the future.
Great, thank you so much. And Tom, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, I know it's supposed to be a listening session, but I did want to ask a question from the government perspective, particularly to take advantage of all the industry participants on the group. When we have started our discussions with developing country governments and policymakers on Open RAN, I find it instructive to talk about the local development opportunities that an open competitive architecture offers. The example I always keep turning into is the opportunities for local white box manufacturing in a country. So I'd like to use this forum to find out if there are other useful examples or field examples that the industry has encountered where, in addition to the opportunity to making equipment domestically, what other types of talking points or work has or projects have you found to be developing countries to be particularly interested in or receptive to, or maybe even an example that you hadn't thought of that might be analogous to local manufacturing?
Great. And while everyone is thinking about that prompt, Alex, why don't you go ahead?
Yep. Can you hear me okay?
We can. Thank
you. So first of all, thanks so much for convening this session today. For folks that don't know me, Alex Botting with the Open RAN Policy Coalition, and I've led our international engagement over the past 4 or 5 months, where we've engaged with about 25 governments from around the world. I would say there's sort of 3 buckets of activity that can be helpful here, and it's somewhat dependent upon the situation of the government that you are talking to. The first is educate. For many governments, this is a new concept, both from a technical standpoint, but understanding the impact of it as well. And to the extent that the US government can continue the work that they have been doing in this space to educate foreign governments about the technology, talk about some of the benefits, including, in many cases, things like helping to close the digital divide because of the flexibility and cost effectiveness that Open RAN can bring with it. I think that's a message that will resonate pretty well. The US government's been good on this already, and we look forward to future opportunities to collaborate on the education piece. A second would be coordination and sharing best practices with partner governments from a policy standpoint. In more of an ongoing fashion, once those policies are in place, so things like investment in R&D, standing up test beds, things like that, it's important that there's ongoing information sharing between governments as well, so that we're not duplicating activities or making the same mistakes along the way, or even spending finite dollars to sort of replicate activities in a way that doesn't drive things forward. And then the final one is encourage activity. It's all too easy for governments, even if they see the benefits here, to sort of sit on their hands and see how things play out. But activity from governments is required, as we've said, particularly on the fiscal side of things, where that's feasible, to drive things forward in a timely fashion, and demonstrating the work that the US government's doing, but also governments like the UK, Germany, Japan, and others, I think is a good way to encourage other partners to follow suit. The final thing I'd say is just a plug for a document that we've pulled together, our Open RAN Policy Roadmap, which lays out the various tools that governments have at their disposal to put forward policies that can help accelerate Open RAN adoption. I think that's up on the Open RAN Policy Coalition's website, and for governments who are newer in this space, it's quite a good document for providing an overview of the various levers they may have at their disposal to accelerate adoption. But thanks again for having us today.
Thank you so much, Alex. Let's go ahead and go back to John, and again, a plug for Tom's request for some good examples for him to use in his work.
Yeah, I think this response is sort of to Tom's question. We see, as being a leader in virtualization and Open RAN, we see a lot of, in fact, involved in a lot of discussions on a global basis about localization of software development and the technology. And one of the areas that we find that local countries want to get involved in is the actual radio designs themselves, because every country, although following somewhat of an ITU type of spectrum policy, always have local country variants. And that's a great way for countries to build an expertise in radio design. Now, one of the barriers that's really got to be addressed in all of that is access to silicon. As the chap from Xilinx talked about earlier, sorry, I apologize for the name, is talking about access to chips, access to reference designs, and then, the localization in terms of filters, casings, manufacturings, and everything else could be done on a local basis. So, there's a pent-up demand to go do this. But access to low-cost silicon, if you like, in terms of building radio reference designs is a key issue.
Great, thank you so much, John. So again, we have some time left to discuss the challenges that you as companies are facing internationally. Things that you think that the United States government should do. Again, we are in the middle of a transition, or I guess we're a little bit into the transition at this point in time. What should the new administration be looking at? What should we be thinking about? In this space, and where should we be engaging? Where should we be putting our firepower? And I see Dileep's hand up, so if we can get him to be a presenter. And Dileep, you are good to go.
Thanks, Travis. Again, Dileep Shahari from Access Partnership. Since we haven't talked about it yet, I just wanted to raise the multilateral fund that was authorized in the USA Telecommunications Act, and which has not yet been authorized, but of course has not yet been appropriated. Although a number of folks in industry, including Access Partnership, when some of our work are hoping and working to hope will get appropriated this year, whether it's part of Senator Schumer's package that he just announced or some other initiative. A lot of bipartisan support for that. I don't have the language of the statute in front of me, but it occurred to me that maybe a lot of people are thinking about that in terms of, okay, what can the U.S. government do, overseas, and how can it distribute its funding to operators? I almost wonder if maybe the U.S. government should also begin essentially doing some groundwork on international authorization to really make that a multilateral fund where other countries see that the U.S. is moving ahead on this, and maybe they will come to the table with some of their money on their own, and it could be sort of a multilateral project. Great to hear, for example, that Jaysha is working with US UK on putting principles together for the G7. So maybe the State Department, that fund, on the assumption that it's going to be appropriated, could be worked into this. So I just wanted to mention that fund as part of this conversation, since I think it will be an important piece.
Great, thank you so much. One of the things that came up in some of the previous comments was standards and the use of standards and standards bodies. This is something that we delved quite a bit into in our request for comment. It's not something we've explicitly mentioned in the agenda here, but something that we would be, of course, welcome thoughts on in terms of what the U.S. engagement should be on within standards bodies. Of course, today we are talking about vendor diversity, and that, of course, primarily focused on things like ORAN. But standards are not just simply, national standards, particularly how the U.S. approaches them. If the folks have thoughts on U.S. participation in and promotion of U.S. industry participation in, or allied country participation in, or partners' participation in standards bodies, and what the focus should be, what we should be doing, we'd love to also hear thoughts on that. And with that, again, I'll just do the housekeeping notes. please raise your hand. If you're on the phone, please shoot me an email, thall, THALL, @ntia.gov. And we have Paul. If we could make Paul a presenter, and then Paul, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yep. Yeah, thanks, Travis. Yeah, I mean, I think the standards are really important. And so, you can't scale a technology unless you have the standards sorted out, right? Because what happens is you have individual integration challenges. Oh, I did it this way, you did it this way. So they really underpin everything. And if you look at the cellular telecom industry around the world today, 3GPP really defined the open standards that we have today. And so the air interface from the device to the network, from the RAN to the core, on an end-to-end basis, I think there's 15,000 different specifications that define that. So it's a huge body of work. So that's really critical, and you could argue that's the most successful open standards organization to date. Now, I think if we look at O-RAN Alliance, then O-RAN Alliance then picks up those 3GPP standards and enhances and adds to them. But what's important, I think, is it is for the good of everyone to have a global set of standards, right? Because that gives the scale in the industry, and that's why our industry is so successful. So I think keeping alignment with 3GPP is really important. And then as we add to that, as we look at O-RAN Alliance, they're taking those baseline standards and then adding to them. So I think they're the sort of two important kind of initiatives that we should work on. And then I think making sure that the voting and contribution processes in each of those organizations done a good way. But I think it would be helpful to have US participation in those standards organizations, and probably more so than there has been to date, to represent the interest. And then if you look at in 3GPP, how organizations like Addis represent sort of the arm of 3GPP in the US. I mean, I think using that organization as well to look after US interests as well. So I think it's keeping global standards, using 3GPP as a baseline, focusing on our Alliance specification standards, doing a really good job of that standards process is really critical for the US, I think.
Thank you so much. Others have any thoughts on that topic? Or, of course, you're welcome to chime in on other aspects of the international piece, or if you really have a burning point that you'd like to make about domestic or just simply the general technology, we welcome that as well. We have Courtney Lang. If we could make Courtney a presenter, and then Courtney, you should be able to unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Unmuted. Sorry about that. Am I now unmuted?
No problem. You're good to go.
Okay. It's just one of those days. Thank you for hosting this listening session, and appreciate you bringing up standards. Certainly, really, really important to 5G. I think we've heard, from a couple of folks today, particularly about the importance of relying on open standards in particular. I would just want to make some comments more broadly on standards and kind of ways in which we see standards being important, and how the USG in particular can support industry participation in standards bodies. I think, kind of the big common denominator to this is really supporting industry-led bodies with those transparent, well-understood rules-based processes already in place. I think it's really important that US companies aren't restricted in the decisions that they make to choose, which bodies are best suited to their work. So figuring out, how to support the industry participation in those bodies is super important. I think also encouraging, again, other nations to rely on and really reference international standards in their relevant policies and regulations, particularly in the context of 5G, but also more broadly, is something incredibly important. I think beyond that, ensuring that current and future policies and regulations don't unintentionally inhibit US company participation in international standards. I'm sure you guys are aware, of the entity listing and designation of Huawei previously had provided some complications for industry trying to participate in standards bodies. So, moving forward, just making sure that policies don't unintentionally inhibit that participation. And then I think finally, kind of at the broadest level, just making sure to continue to engage regularly with US stakeholders who are participating in 3GPP and other meetings to make sure that information is flowing both ways. I think, really consistent engagement can help ensure that everybody's kind of on the same page about what's happening in those bodies, kind of what misunderstandings might be occurring, and just kind of continuing to keep that line of communication open so that any policies that the US government or activities that the US government undertakes is founded in kind of anecdotal evidence that can be provided by industry. So those are just some top line points. I'm sure nothing is incredibly surprising there, but did just want to, kind of make the case more broadly for how the U.S. can appropriately support industry-led bodies. Thanks so much again.
Great, thank you, Courtney. Any other thoughts? Again, we're looking generally at how the United States can push the policy goal of ensuring vendor diversity with our partners and with our partner countries, partner organizations. One piece of that, of course, is standards, as we were discussed, but there are many other aspects as well. So we have Dileep and then Alex. So Dileep, go ahead as soon as you're made into a presenter.
Sure, just briefly on standards, fully agree with everything that Courtney just said about giving industry flexibility. There has been talk in the past. Some companies are maybe for it, others may not, depending on where they sit, about having the US government do more to encourage companies to send representatives to participate in global standards bodies. Ideas like maybe modifying the R&D tax credit to make clear that companies can receive money or subsidies in some way for sending representatives to the global standards bodies. Some companies will fear either that they wouldn't get to participate in that, or they fear it would send the wrong signal to the rest of the world in terms of the US trying to politicize the standards process. So, I just wanted to throw that out there that, there are potentially some policy options, but that if you do go down that route or make a recommendation to Congress to do that it should just be done in a nuanced and kind of careful way to make sure that it doesn't look like the US is politicizing the process. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Alex Botting with the Open RAN Policy Coalition again. There was mention earlier of the G7 and understanding that this is a listening session for NTIA, not a speaking session. It would be great if there is any more information that folks are able to share on that either now or afterwards. I think we'd really welcome learning a bit more about it. More generally, I would say, multilateral forums are going to be a big piece of the puzzle here. We've heard talk about a sort of D10 group being pulled together. The Quad is one that's increasingly active group. We know there's some activity in APEC, and we've heard talk on the industry side about NATO perhaps being another vector that or another forum that could be utilized here. So any information that you're able to share on other plans in multilateral forums would be welcome, but just a general sort of plug for using any and all avenues available to drive this forward with different coalitions of partners.
I will let our leadership think about that just for a minute. But in the meantime, why don't we turn to Azita and then Liam. So Azita, we'll go ahead and make you a presenter, and you should be able to unmute yourself, and then we'll turn to Liam.
Thank you, Travis. I wanted to go back to Tom's question about white boxes for developing countries for the radios. And I just wanted to say that for us, since we deeply understand the components that go into the radio units, we're actually doing that whole designing of the RU and then working with our partners to bring it as a product so that we could use. So for example, our millimeter wave base station, which operates at 28 gigahertz, we've designed it with our partners, and that is at the price point of an outdoor Wi-Fi access point. So that's not just something that you do for developing countries and kind of making it sound like maybe it's not full featured, but it's something that you can use in developed nations and just to reduce the cost. So we are very cost conscious because we want to pass those savings on to our subscribers. And as such, we really pay attention to every component that goes in there. And those radio units can be used in all kinds of networks, whether it's developing nations or developing nations. Thank you. Travis, back to you.
Thank you. Liam, go ahead.
Yeah, whenever we talk about standards, obviously it's very critical that, from the US perspective, that we're doing the most advanced research in our universities. And one of the things that we've noticed as we work with companies relative to things like reference designs using our parts is sometimes it's easier to find universities in other localities, for example, places like Germany that have much more capability in this area. And one of the things that I feel is critical is to have a pipeline of very much advanced research in this area. And I hate to bring up the dreaded 6G word, but nonetheless, right, we do need to be thinking for the future as well of how we can influence technology going forward. And to be honest, I don't think we're really extremely well positioned from a research perspective to drive some of those things. I think there is a lot of activity, but I think one of the biggest issues we see is the connection between universities and real world applications. And I think we need to continue pushing that as we move forward.
Thank you so much, Liam. Let me give one last prompt. If you are on the phone, thall, THALL at ntia.gov. If you are on Teams, please feel free to raise your hand. We are looking for, again, feedback on how to pursue the goal of vendor diversity internationally with our partners, with developing nations, and ensuring that we are pushing towards that goal. And since I'm not actually seeing any hands right now, you have, while I'm talking, you have the opportunity right now. I'm going to give the opportunity to have the last word before I turn it back to Evelyn Ramali, our acting assistant secretary and administrator. So if anyone would like to have the last word closing out this listening session, now is your chance. And seeing none, let me go ahead and turn it back to Evelyn, and we'll be able to give some folks a little bit of time back in their more afternoons and mornings. So go ahead, Evelyn.
Thank you, Travis. And of course, I'm always happy to have the last word. So appreciate that. Just want to take a moment to thank all of our participants today, everyone who was able to join us. In terms of next steps, from both our first listening session and today's, we will be building the feedback from both of these sessions into a proceedings report to share with the administration. We really appreciate, we've had so many takeaways from today's session, as well as the session in January on incentives. So we're looking forward to having a robust report to provide along with your recommendations. I can't stress enough just how critical this issue is. Of course, I know we all know that having robust and resilient 5G networks to carry us into this next wave of innovation for the US and the globe, as well as allowing more inclusion for our society and connectivity with the networks is just so critical. Making sure that they are robust, secure, that we have robust competition, and that diversity to make sure that is possible is so critical to where we're headed, and the stakes are so high. So we very much appreciate industry jumping in with us as we talk through these issues. It's clear that the state of industry leadership in this area is very strong. We see that very much, and it's just useful to have the conversation with you as we map out next steps for the USG in this area as well. So again, thank you for taking your time to share this feedback, and we look forward to next steps in terms of the partnership on these issues with you. And be well, everyone, and we will be back in touch on this effort soon. Thank you.
Thanks all. And